Like Hoover started the FBI because he saw the Cheka running around the Soviet Union going, I want that.
I think what's frustrating to someone like me is that I'm not asking you to agree with me, but my stance is I think that the FBI and a lot of these agencies don't like Trump because they view him as a threat to their sort of hegemony that they've had with like all of their buddies that have been in charge for so long. And so if they are the ones who get to use their discretion and they're doing so for political reasons, basically to benefit themselves, it becomes very difficult then for a layman like me to sort of point out all of the problems with the double standard. So the easiest example I could give is like the IG report that was looking at the difference between, or that was looking at Crossfire Hurricane, which was the investigation into Trump, and then looking at the midterm exam, which was, or the mid-year exam, which was the investigation into Hillary. It's almost as if I'm reading between the lines. So maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if you think I'm wrong. But it's almost like IG Horowitz is saying like, yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on here, but he's looking at each individual action in a vacuum. And he's like, technically, this one action that the FBI took, is it within their bounds? Technically, yes. And so what that does is, it doesn't really paint the picture of, but every single time they could benefit Hillary and her team, they took the action that benefited them. And every single time it was going after Trump, they went as aggressively as possible. And obviously, I'm being hyperbolic, not every time, but the vast majority. Yeah. And so because of this idea of, well, there is discretion, it seems to me that it's difficult to explain to the American people, like, but there's something more going on here. That discretion shouldn't always go one way for one side of the ledger and always go the other way.
Yeah, and it's been a little while since I've read both those, the report breaking up both those. But you do run into that issue of, especially at the top of the FBI, you had a lot of very partisan people, especially with the counterintelligence division, especially with you had a lot of people wanting to make things go one way. Don't worry, we have an insurance policy.
Right.
Things like that. And certainly, yes, it's very hard. But the one thing I will say about the FBI, it's like they've been corrupt forever.
Right.
Like Hoover started the FBI because he saw the Cheka running around the Soviet Union going, I want that.
He was sitting around in a dress like, yeah.
Yes, well, the FBI spent the 30s and the 40s acquiring a blackmail empire.
Mm-hmm.
They were, Hoover had, that's why he was untouchable. He had dirt on everyone. The FBI surveilled the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. You get into the 60s, they ran COINTELPRO. They sent death threats to Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get into the 70s, like PatCon. You get into the 90s, you have Rico and Ruby Ridge. Like, no, the FBI has been very horribly corrupt for a very long time. Now, it just happens to be that people who are left-leaning have made their way to the top, and that's just the way it's worked out so far. But I think I would say the FBI issue is just a really hard issue because people on the right tend to, back the blue no matter what, and it's like, well, you're backing the blue, and that blue line is beating you over the head. But once again, in law enforcement, though, you see it at the local level. Mm-hmm. How many times do the cops investigate cells? They find they've done nothing wrong. So it's, like I said, it's not only the FBI, and there is a lot of corruption. It's people want to find people look for the corruption where they want to find the corruption or where they think it should be and don't really care where it comes from else. Mm-hmm. And that's really more of a, because I say this on my thing all the time, we're all hypocrites at the end of the day in some form or another. We all, well, what about this? It's like, well, it's like the meme goes, I don't care about that. I care about this.
Right.
So.
No, it's absolutely true. And there is a valid criticism. It's easy when you see you or people that you affiliate with that are being targeted to all of a sudden have a problem with it. One of the things I talk about a lot is, as someone who is sort of a Ron Paul libertarian, I was furious with the Patriot Act. And I spoke up, even though I didn't have a channel or anything, but I thought that some of the treatment of some Muslim Americans was appalling, right? That they were basically like, sort of like a lot of what we saw with the Gretchen Whitmer case, where they were going in. There are cases where they went in with people with like disabilities who happen to be Muslim and sent these honeypots in to like convince them to do things. And it would be people that you could look at and say, oh, that's someone who probably special needs that probably would have to be tucked. And a lot of right wingers didn't care. A lot of them were like, well, screw that. We're going to get our pound of flesh because of 9/11 and we blame Muslim terrorists. And so whatever, it's not affecting me. The Patriot Act, I'm a law abiding citizen. Patriot Act doesn't affect me. And it is, so I do understand that there's a valid criticism to be had. It's like, oh, well, you like Donald Trump, so you're upset now because the FBI's gone after him, but you didn't say anything in the past. So I agree with that. I just think that it's one of the frustrations. Obviously, there's a level of, if they're putting their thumb on the scale of our politics, that's very bad. But for me personally, who tries to debate many people on this, one of the things that happens is, if it's true that the FBI is biased, which will, just for the sake of argument, we'll say it is, it's difficult then to find evidence that proves the double standard, because the very entity that would be looking for that evidence is itself biased. And so you end up with situations like this. I'll say, hey, if we say that mishandling classified information is a crime, so be it. It should just be an equal standard. So you want to go after Trump? Fine. Hillary's team knowingly deleted subpoenaed evidence. They know it. They have them dead to rights. And instead of charging anyone, they gave everyone immunity. And then when I bring this up, this is what a left-winger will say. Well, did Hillary order that? And I'll be like, well, we don't know, because they gave immunity and didn't investigate it. So how would I have that evidence?
That's when you put Huma on the stand and say, hi, Huma. Or whoever was smashing the phones with hammers. Okay, cool. You've got an evidence tampering charge. You've got an obstruction charge. Tell us what you want to tell us what we want to know. Okay, sing. Oh, I did it all myself. Fine, then you guys can go to prison for 50 years.
And I say this all the time. The left understands this. And by the way, it's not just a left-right issue. I'm just using the left as sort of the generality. They understand this because when it comes to Trump, anyone around Trump that gets charged, they're super giddy. Because they're like, oh, that guy might flip on Trump. Like his hand, the guy that worked at Mar-a-Lago that's been charged with mishandling.
Nada. Yeah.
Nada, right? Like, as soon as they went after Nada, everyone was like, he's going to sing like a bird. They're going to twist the screws. Heck, just some normal dude like me that watches Law and Order. Like, any legal drama or cop movie, it's always the same. Let's get the low-level drug dealer. We could prove he committed a crime. We'll turn the screws on him, and he'll sing about the guy that's at the top of the food chain. But for some reason, with the Hillary investigation, it was the exact opposite. It was like, all right, we give you total immunity, Paul Combetta. Now tell us, who ordered you to destroy the evidence? Oh, I did it all myself. Well, rats, I guess that's the end of our investigation. It's so silly. It's like, but wait a minute. Of course, with prosecutor discretion, this is within their rights to do. But doesn't that come across as like, well, how could we on one hand say, we gave people immunity, it's not that big of a deal, these charges, and then the FBI spend all of this time going after anyone connected to Trump, like mishandling classified documents. Oh my goodness, this is a serious crime.
I mean, here's the thing. I mean, like I said, if you do, whether or not that's truly the case or you feel that way, there's not a real good way to resolve that question other than, it's still, America's legal system is garbage in a lot of ways. It's still the only legal system I ever want to deal with.
Sure.
And that's all I have for an answer is there's really any way you want to fix it is not going to be you will not like what the cure looks like 10 years from now. Mm-hmm.
But I saw this with the Michael Flynn pleading guilty, right? Mm-hmm. And I would argue like, well, I don't think he was really guilty. I think he was pressured into that because he was afraid they were going to go after his son. And all these people on the left will be like, no. And I'm like, but one of the arguments that the left always made that I bought was false confessions, right? Where like, and there's a whole Netflix series about it. I forget what, like the confession tapes where they goad these people, the psychological torment that like law enforcement could put on a person, 24 hours of interrogation. All of a sudden these people are willing to sign anything like, sure. Well,
ultimately, though, Michael Flynn talked too much was his problem.
That's right.
Whether or not he was truly guilty or truly innocent, Michael Flynn talked himself into a hole.
Right.
And then you have like the FBI where their written statements are the only record. I know that guy Jeremy Kaufman. You saw his Twitter where the FBI rolled up to his house. Record the FBI chat.
Yeah.
Do not let them, because what they write down on that form is the only documentation. They get to come into court and wave that around saying, "This is my official document." Well, can it ever be altered or edited? Yeah, but it's still their official document. So,
can we get a group of you lawyers together to here's something I've been saying for years. I can't.
No, Rob, you don't want to hear my answer for the FBI's.
I want to disband it. But how about this? Just as a simple start, I have this. I'm not a wealthy man. It's got this camera right here. It could record things. How in the hell is our FBI not recording interviews?
Because they don't want to.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And it's sad that no one's like sat down and said, and even in the Flynn case, they admitted, oops, we wrote a couple things that were erroneous in our records. We'll correct it after the. It's like, even if you want to take maliciousness out of it, there's a solid chance that if I'm interviewing you right now and it's not recorded and I'm just taking notes, I could, especially in a legal case where one wrong word could make the difference between your, like, these are humans, they're fallible, they could screw up, and that's if they're not corrupt, you know.
Yeah, well, I use the example all the time. We all screw up at our jobs. If you work at McDonald's, you might put a pickle on a burger and it says no pickles. Okay, you're flying a space shuttle. You might be off by like a quarter of a degree. Like everybody screws up at their job. You might forget to put a cover sheet in a TPS report. There's a spectrum of jobs and a spectrum of mistakes. Now, the scale of that mistake and the result, okay, those are very different, but we all screw up on our jobs.
Yeah, and it's really, I just can't, I get it if these are policies that were created in the 40s. Difficult, possibly, for the FBI at the time to carry around audio equipment. But we have a society where literally every single person has the ability to video and audio record at any time. And our FBI can't literally be like, hey, we're going to be recording this so that we have some sort of it just it really illustrates to me. And again, this is something you would think that you could get the left on board with, because they correctly will say, like, well, if you're talking about the police dealing in an inner city situation, oftentimes they could railroad, someone out, a race, systemic racism or systemic poverty causes police to do these, whatever. It is true that could happen. That's why they want police body cams. There's a big sort of bipartisan movement for that, but not for the FBI to record interviews. It just seems like it's one of these spots where the only reason that it's not a big issue is no one on the right's really capable of articulating it, and the left, that otherwise you would think would be on top of this, are like, screw it, right now it's benefiting, it's going against people we don't like, so screw it, we don't care.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's really more of the issue now as well. It's benefiting me, so who cares? And then should that change, then the right will just as very quickly say, like, man, this is good enough.
Yeah. Can you tell my audience where to find you, like what times you would be live or when you'd prefer that people check you out?
Yeah, sure. So you guys can find me over on YouTube at Potentially Criminal. You can find me on Twitter at LawTubeSean. There's a whole reason why I have that instead of Potentially Criminal, and that's because I went to the gulag for a while. So that's where you can find me there. I do a weekly show every Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern time, the only time zone that matters.